I took the job because it was quiet, remote, and paid better than anything else I could find on short notice. The listing called it Remote Property Systems Monitor. It was a contract position for a regional company that managed dozens of high-end vacation cabins scattered across a mountain range about 4 hours north of where I lived. Most of them were rented seasonally, some year-round, some not at all. My responsibility was simple: monitor security feeds, door logs, and environmental systems overnight, flag anything unusual, and escalate it to on-call maintenance or security if needed. No patrols, no customer interaction. Just screens, timestamps, and alerts. After 3 years working IT help desk, it sounded like a dream. The company mailed me a laptop already configured with their monitoring software, along with a short handbook that stressed 2 things: confidentiality and not overreacting. The cabins were remote. Wildlife triggered motion sensors constantly. Weather knocked cameras offline. False positives were common. Patterns matter more than incidents, the handbook said. For the first 2 weeks, that proved true. My shifts ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I'd sit in my apartment, lights low, coffee going cold, cycling through live camera thumbnails and scrolling event logs. Most nights were painfully dull. Snow blowing across driveways, a raccoon standing on its hind legs like it was auditioning for something. Once, a drunk couple tried to unlock the wrong cabin for nearly 10 minutes before realizing their mistake. I logged it all. I followed protocol. I never felt unsafe. That changed when I noticed Cabin 12. Cabin 12 wasn't special on paper. Mid-size, 2-bedroom, deep in the woods, about a mile off the nearest maintained road. According to the schedule, it hadn't been rented in months. It was marked offline but monitored, meaning no guests, no cleaning crews, but systems still active to prevent damage. At first, the irregularity was tiny. At 1:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, Cabin 12's interior temperature adjusted itself by 2 degrees. No alert triggered because it was within acceptable variance. The HVAC systems sometimes recalibrated automatically, except the log showed a manual override. I hovered my cursor over the entry, reread it, then shrugged it off. Maintenance could have accessed it earlier, and the system logged late. The software wasn't perfect. 2 nights later, it happened again. Same cabin, same 2-degree adjustment, manual override, 1:14 a.m. I pulled up the camera feed. The interior camera thumbnails loaded slowly, then resolved into empty rooms. Living area, clean, staged, untouched. Kitchen, nothing out of place. Hallway, dark. Bedroom, made bed, shadows from tree branches brushing the window. No movement, no heat signatures, no door entries. I made a note and moved on. Over the next week, Cabin 12 kept nudging at my attention in small, deniable ways. A porch light turning on for exactly 5 minutes, then off. A bathroom fan running briefly at odd hours. A spike in water pressure that didn't align with any scheduled system test. Each time, the cameras showed nothing. I checked access logs obsessively. No door unlocks, no window alerts, no registered keycard or digital code usage. According to the system, no one had entered or exited Cabin 12 since late autumn. I told myself what the handbook told me: patterns matter more than incidents. So I started tracking it. I created a private spreadsheet. Dates, times, actions. Always between 1 and 1:30 a.m., always minor, always manual, always Cabin 12. After 10 days, the pattern was undeniable. I escalated it to my supervisor via the internal messaging system. Her response came an hour later. Probably system ghosting. Cabin 12's hub is one of the older models. We're phasing it out next quarter. Keep an eye on it, but don't lose sleep. I should have listened. The night everything shifted was a Friday. Around 1:58 a.m., my screen flickered as the software refreshed all feeds. When they came back up, Cabin 12's living room camera showed something new. A chair was pulled out from the dining table. Not overturned, not dramatic, just moved, angled slightly, as if someone had stood up from it and pushed it back without thinking. My stomach tightened. I checked the timestamp, live feed. I pulled up the previous night's snapshot for comparison. The chair had been tucked in neatly, like all the others. No alerts, no motion triggers, no door logs, just a chair that hadn't been there before. I zoomed in, scanning the grainy image for signs of compression artifacts or lag. The lighting was consistent. The shadows were correct. Then the camera audio spiked. Just a little, a soft blip on the waveform. I turned my volume up. At first, I thought it was static. Then I heard breathing. Slow, controlled, close to the microphone. And just before I could mute the feed or disconnect entirely, a voice spoke, calm and almost curious, directly into the empty cabin. "I know you're watching." The screen went black, and my system immediately began reconnecting to Cabin 12's feed. When the screen went black, my first instinct wasn't fear. It was panic, sharp and technical, the kind that comes when you think something expensive just broke on your watch. I checked my internet connection. Solid, no packet loss. Other cabin feeds were still live, cycling normally. Only Cabin 12 had dropped. The system status panel showed reconnecting in yellow text, pulsing once every few seconds. I replayed the last 10 seconds in my head. The chair, the breathing, the voice. "I know you're watching." I told myself it had to be audio bleed, some glitch where another cabin's feed cross-wired, or a cached clip replaying out of context, anything that fit the handbook's quiet insistence that systems lie before people do. But my hands were shaking when the feed snapped back online. Cabin 12's living room reappeared. The chair was still pulled out. The room was empty. No breathing, no audio spike. Just the soft hum of the cabin's ambient mic picking up nothing but HVAC noise. I immediately pulled the logs. No motion detected, no audio trigger, no camera interruption recorded. According to the system, the feed had never gone offline. I sat back, heart pounding, and stared at the grid of thumbnails like one of them might confess. Protocol said to escalate verbally threatening audio immediately, even if it was a false positive. I messaged my supervisor again, attaching the log timestamps and noting possible unauthorized occupancy. This time, she called me. It was 2:07 a.m. "You sound stressed," she said, after I explained everything, her voice flat, but not unkind. "I heard someone," I said. "They spoke directly into the mic." There was a pause. I imagined her rubbing her eyes, weighing whether this was worth waking someone else. "Did you record it?" "No," I admitted. "The feed dropped before I could clip it." "That's unfortunate," she said. "Look, I believe you heard something, but Cabin 12's cameras don't have two-way audio. Whoever you heard couldn't know you were watching." "That's not true," I said. "The mics are always hot. Someone inside could assume." "Assume, yes. No, no." She reminded me that several cabin owners occasionally accessed their properties without updating the system. It wasn't ideal, but it happened. Sometimes they forgot codes, used old keys, entered through maintenance doors that didn't trigger alerts. And the logs? The manual overrides? The timing? "Old hub," she said again. "It ghosts. That's why we're replacing it." She told me to document everything, flag the cabin for physical inspection during daylight hours, and take a break if I needed one. Before hanging up, she added, "You're doing fine. Don't let one weird night get into your head." I didn't sleep after my shift ended. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the breathing again. Not heavy, not panicked, intentional, like someone leaning in close enough to test the mic. The inspection team went out that afternoon. Their report came in while I was making dinner. Cabin 12, no signs of forced entry, no occupants found, all windows and doors secured, minor dust disturbance consistent with wildlife or prior maintenance, systems operational. No mention of the chair. I opened the inspection photos. The living room looked staged again. The chair was pushed neatly back under the table. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made my skin crawl, because someone had moved it back. That night, I watched Cabin 12 more closely than any other feed.
Nothing happened until 1:11 a.m. The porch camera flicked to motion-triggered recording. The feed showed snowflakes drifting sideways through the beam of the exterior light. No footprints, no movement, just snow. Then, at the edge of the frame, something shifted. Not entered, not walked in, just leaned. A dark shape pressed briefly against the outer wall, just enough to occlude part of the lens. I couldn't make out details. No face, no limbs. The camera didn't register it as a person. The shape lingered for maybe 2 seconds, then pulled away. The porch light shut off. I rewound the clip over and over, slowing it down, adjusting contrast, zooming until the pixels broke apart. The shape didn't move like an animal. It didn't move like wind-blown debris. It moved deliberately. I checked the interior cameras immediately. Nothing. Then, the kitchen light turned on. I froze. The kitchen camera adjusted exposure, revealing the empty counter, the sink, the refrigerator. The light stayed on for exactly 30 seconds. Then it turned off. No motion alert, no door alert, no audio. I hovered over the emergency escalation button, the one that bypassed supervisors and went straight to regional security. Pressing it would dispatch someone immediately. It would also mean writing a report that could cost me the job if it turned out to be nothing. Patterns matter more than incidents, the handbook said. But this was a pattern. I pressed record on every feed connected to cabin 12 and leaned closer to the screen. At 1:19 a.m., the hallway camera flickered. For a single frame, I saw something at the far end of the hall. Not a full figure, just the suggestion of one. A shoulder, the edge of a head. And then the feed stabilized. The hallway was empty again. My phone buzzed on my desk. A new system notification. Cabin 12, interior camera 3, audio input detected. I turned the volume up, heart hammering. This time, there was no breathing, just a soft scraping sound, like fingernails dragging slowly across wood. And then, very quietly, the same calm voice as before said, "You didn't tell them everything." The audio cut. The feed stayed live, and on my screen, one by one, the interior cameras of cabin 12 began switching off.
When the last interior camera went dark, the software didn't panic the way I did. No alarms blared, no red banners flashed across the screen. Each feed from cabin 12 simply changed status from live to unavailable, one after another, like someone methodically flipping switches. The porch camera stayed on. That felt intentional. I slammed the emergency escalation button. This time, there was no hesitation. The system acknowledged the request instantly, generating a case number and routing it to regional security. Estimated response time? 45 minutes. 45 minutes might as well have been a year. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my face, trying to slow my breathing. Every instinct screamed that I should disconnect, shut the laptop, walk away. But the porch feed held my attention like a threat you can't look away from. Snow continued to fall. The cabin sat dark and quiet, its windows reflecting nothing. Then the porch camera tilted. Not glitched, not jerked by wind. It tilted downward smoothly, reframing itself so the front door filled the center of the screen. I whispered, "No," even though no one could hear me. That camera wasn't motorized. None of the exterior cameras were. They were fixed angle, manually mounted during installation. The only way it could move is if someone physically touched it. The door handle jiggled. Once. Twice. The system chimed softly. Exterior contact detected. Finally, an alert. The handle stopped moving. For several seconds, nothing happened. The porch light flicked on automatically, illuminating the wooden planks and drifting snow. Then the door opened. The camera's microphone picked up the creak of hinges and the sound of boots stepping inside. Heavy, unhurried. The door closed behind them.
The porch camera stayed on, staring at the empty space where someone had just been. I waited for the interior feeds to come back online. They didn't. I checked system diagnostics. All interior cameras reported manual shutdown. Not power loss, not interference. Manual. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Security's en route," a man said briskly. "We see the same thing you're seeing. Stay on the line. There's someone inside. They shut the cameras off. They know the system." Another pause. "Have you ever been to these cabins in person?" "No." "Ever shared system access with anyone?" "No." "Okay," he said. "Then listen carefully. There's a blind spot." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "That cabin, cabin 12, was built before our standardization. There's a section of the interior that doesn't have coverage, a storage room off the hallway. No camera, no motion sensor." I pictured the hallway feed, the single frame where I'd seen the edge of someone standing just out of view. They could stay there indefinitely, come out when they want, move when the system's quiet. The porch camera went dark. Not disconnected. Covered. The audio cut to muffled static, like fabric pressed against the mic. The man on the phone cursed under his breath. They're still there, and they're doing this deliberately. My laptop chimed again. "System message, cabin 12, network access attempt detected." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means someone inside is trying to connect to the local hub. They might be trying to disable everything." "Can they see me?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Another pause. "No," he said, but there was hesitation there now. "They shouldn't be able to." The network access attempt failed. Then it tried again. And again. Each attempt was logged with a slightly different signature, like someone blessing passwords patiently. I watched as system permissions began changing, subtle things at first. Logging intervals lengthened, alert thresholds adjusted. "They're escalating privileges," the man said. "They shouldn't know how to do this." My supervisor joined the call silently. I could hear her breathing. "This isn't a prank. This isn't a ghosting hub." The access attempts stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one interior camera came back online. Just one. The hallway. The feed showed the narrow corridor, dimly lit by emergency lights. At the far end, the storage room door stood open. Someone was standing just inside it. I could see more of them now. A man, tall, wearing dark clothing and gloves. His face was partially obscured by the angle, but I could see his eyes. He was looking directly into the camera, directly at me. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there perfectly still, like he knew exactly how long the feed would stay active. Then very deliberately, he raised one gloved hand and pointed, not at the camera, at something beside it, at the wall, the blind spot. The feed cut. My laptop chimed one last time before everything associated with Cabin 12 disappeared from the dashboard entirely. Cabin 12, status, offline. The man from security spoke again, his voice tight. "We just lost the cabin." I stared at the blank space where the feeds had been. "What do you mean, lost?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, my supervisor spoke. "Did you notice that the access attempts stopped right after you escalated?" "Yes," I said. "They weren't trying to lock us out. They were waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you," she said, "to show them how far they could go." My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a text message from an unknown number. It contained a single sentence. "You should have checked the cabin you live in." And just as I started to stand up, every light in my apartment shut off at once.
When the lights went out, my apartment didn't go quiet the way it does during a normal power outage. The refrigerator hum died mid-note. My computer monitor went black. The overhead fan slowed, clicked once, and stopped. But my laptop stayed on, its battery kicking in automatically, casting a pale glow across my living room. I stood there, frozen, phone buzzing in my hand. The text message was still on the screen. You should have checked the cabin you live in. I didn't live in a cabin. I lived in a third-floor apartment in a concrete building surrounded by other concrete buildings. The idea was ridiculous. That didn't matter. What's happening? My supervisor asked through the phone speaker. I'd forgotten the call was still connected. My power just went out, I said. All of it. Citywide outage? The security lead asked. I crossed to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch. Every other building across the street was lit up. Streetlights glowed. Cars passed. Someone walked a dog. No, I said. Just me. A heavy silence filled the call. Disconnect your laptop from the network, the security lead said. Right now. I hesitated. If I do that, I lose everything. You already lost cabin 12, he said. Unplug it. I reached down and pulled Ethernet cable free. The dashboard immediately grayed out, feeds freezing in place. My phone buzzed again. Another text. You noticed patterns. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I'm getting messages, I said. They're from him or them. That's not possible, my supervisor said. We don't share your personal information with... I never said you did, I cut in, but they know me. A soft sound drifted through my apartment. At first, I thought it was tinnitus, a high, thin ringing. Then I realized it was coming from the hallway, from the other side of my front door. Someone was breathing. The same slow, controlled rhythm I'd heard through the cabin microphone. I muted my phone and stood perfectly still. The breathing didn't stop. It didn't get closer either, just stayed there, patient. I thought about the text, the cabin you live in. The realization hit me in pieces. My apartment complex used a centralized smart system, digital locks, networked thermostats, shared maintenance access, everything tied to a property management backend. Not that different from the cabins. I unmuted my phone. There's someone outside my door, I whispered. Get out, the security lead said immediately. Do you have another exit? Fire stairs, at the end of the hall. Take them, now. The breathing stopped. Then my door handle turned. Slowly, deliberately. It didn't rattle. Whoever was on the other side tested it gently like they already knew it was locked. My phone buzzed again. You escalated. The lock clicked. I didn't wait to see if it would hold. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and my jacket and bolted for the fire stairs. The emergency lights in the hallway were still on, bathing everything in dull red. Halfway down the hall, I heard my apartment door open. Footsteps followed. Not running, walking, unhurried. I hit the stairwell door and flung it open, taking the steps 2 at a time. My lungs burned, but I didn't slow down until I burst out into the alley behind the building. Cold air hit my face. The night smelled like wet concrete and exhaust. I didn't stop moving until I reached the street. Only then did I turn around. My apartment looked normal, quiet, windows dark where people slept, lit where they didn't. I stared up at my apartment window. The light flicked on. Just mine. Then the silhouette appeared. A man stood inside my living room, backlit by the overhead lamp. Tall, still, head tilted slightly, as if curious. Even from the street, I knew it was the same man from the hallway camera. My phone buzzed one more time. Now it's real. I didn't go back inside. I spent the night in my car, parked under a streetlight watching the building until dawn. The man never appeared again. The light in my apartment turned off around 3 a.m. When the sun came up, I went straight to the police. They took my statement seriously at first, then less so. No forced entry, no signs of a break-in. My door lock logs showed it had been opened using a valid maintenance override code at 1:42 a.m. The code had been revoked months ago. The officer suggested maybe someone from building management had entered by mistake. Maybe I panicked. Maybe stress from night work made me misinterpret things. I almost believed him.
until I got another message while sitting in the precinct lobby. Part 4 of 10. I stared at the screen, blood running cold. That wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And somewhere, someone was keeping track of the story better than I was.
I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Part 4 of 10. The timestamp showed it had been sent while I was inside the police station, surrounded by officers, cameras, and glass walls. My phone hadn't left my hand. No one had touched it. I showed it to the officer who'd taken my statement. He frowned, the kind of frown that wasn't concern so much as fatigue. Is this supposed to mean something? He knows, I said. He knows the structure. He's referencing what's happening like it's planned. The officer handed the phone back to me gently, the way you do when you don't want to escalate someone's anxiety. Look, you had a stressful night. You work with surveillance systems, right? It's not unusual for your brain to pattern match. Pattern. That word again. I left the station with no case number, no patrol assigned, and a vague suggestion to stay with a friend for a few days. I didn't have anyone close enough to feel safe explaining this to, so I did the one thing I thought might help. I called my supervisor and told her everything. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. "You're not coming back on shift," she said. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by fear. Am I fired? No, she said. You're compromised. She explained that internal security had begun auditing all system access linked to my credentials, not because they suspected me, but because whoever was doing this clearly understood their infrastructure too well. They might be using you as a test case, she said, or a rehearsal. For what? I asked. She didn't answer right away. For scalability, she said finally. If someone can move from an abandoned cabin to a private apartment without tripping alarms, that's dangerous. I asked her if they'd contacted law enforcement beyond my local station. Yes, she said, quietly. That scared me more than if she'd said no. I didn't go back to my apartment. I booked the cheapest motel I could find near the highway, the kind with exterior doors and flickering neon signs. It wasn't comfortable, but it felt less controllable, less networked. I powered my phone off and paid in cash. For 6 hours, nothing happened. I showered. I slept a little. I woke up in a sweat, convinced I'd heard breathing, only to realize it was my own. When I turned my phone back on, I had 3 missed calls from unknown numbers and 1 new message. Change of setting doesn't change the arc. I threw the phone across the bed. I didn't turn it back on. The escalation came without technology. That evening, I went to the motel office to extend my stay. The clerk barely looked up as I slid my credit card across the counter. "Someone was looking for you earlier," he said casually. My stomach dropped. What? "Guy came by this afternoon, asked for your room number, said he was with IT. I laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Did he give it to him? No, policy, but he knew your name. My hands started shaking. What did he look like? The clerk thought for a moment. Tall, quiet, didn't blink much, real polite. I didn't ask anything else. I went back to my room, locked the door, and shoved the dresser against it. Then I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, trying to think. The phrase kept looping in my head. Part 4 of 10. He wasn't improvising. He was pacing himself. I realized then that this wasn't about the cabin, or the job, or even me specifically. It was about observation, about watching someone notice patterns and pushing back. I thought about all the nights I'd spent staring at screens, assuming control because I could see things others couldn't, because I noticed what didn't fit. Now, someone was doing the same to me. I turned my phone back on. Another message came through immediately, like it had been waiting. Good, you're still engaging. I typed back before I could stop myself. What do you want? The response was instant. To finish.
A photo followed. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. My apartment, from inside. The angle was wrong for any of my cameras. It was taken from somewhere low near the hallway. The caption read, "Part 5 ends when you stop running." Outside my motel room, footsteps passed slowly along the walkway. They stopped, right in front of my door. And then, very softly, someone knocked.
The knock wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. It was careful. 3 soft taps, evenly spaced, like someone who didn't want to wake the neighbors. I held my breath. The footsteps outside shifted slightly, weight moving from one foot to the other. Whoever it was knew I was awake. The lights were on. The dresser scraping against the door earlier hadn't been subtle. Another knock. This time closer to the center of the door. "Front desk," a man's voice said. Calm, neutral, professional. I didn't answer. My phone buzzed in my hand. Wrong answer. The door handle turned. The dresser rattled as pressure was applied, testing the barricade. Not forcing it, just measuring. "Sir," the voice said again, still polite, "there's been a complaint." A complaint. Like this was a normal interaction. Like we were still pretending this fit inside rules. I backed away from the door, heart slamming against my ribs, scanning the room for options. The window looked out onto the parking lot, ground level, curtains drawn. I could hear a truck pass on the highway beyond the motel. The handle stopped moving. Footsteps retreated. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Then my phone buzzed again. "You don't trust interfaces anymore." Good. I didn't sleep that night. Just before dawn, I risked peeking through the curtain. The walkway was empty. No sign of anyone lingering. No footprints I could see. I waited until the sun was fully up before leaving the room. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't go home. I drove. No destination, just distance. By mid-morning, my supervisor called from a secure number. "You need to come in," she said, "in person." "Why?" I asked. "Because this crossed a line last night," she said, "and because what we found changes things." The office was in a low, unmarked building on the edge of an industrial park. No logo, no sign. I'd never been there before. Everything I'd done for the company had been remote. Security buzzed me in. Phones were sealed in signal-blocking pouches at the door. Inside, the mood was different. Tense. Focused. No casual chatter. They sat me down in a small conference room with no windows. My supervisor, the security lead, a man I didn't recognize who didn't introduce himself. They showed me a timeline. Not mine. His. Cabin 12 wasn't the first. There were 5 other properties over the past 2 years, different regions, different companies, all remote, all lightly monitored. In each case, someone had lived inside a property for weeks without being detected, not squatting, not hiding, testing, adjusting systems, learning blind spots, leaving subtle signs. In 3 cases, the employee who noticed first quit within a month. In 1 case, the employee vanished. No body, no activity since. I felt cold all over. "They all noticed patterns," I said quietly. "Yes," he replied, "and they all engaged." My supervisor slid a final document across the table. It was a transcript. Messages. Mine and others. The language was consistent, calm, precise, almost instructional. "You're not the first part 4, she said. "You're the furthest one to make it to part 5. "What happens at 10? I asked. No one answered. They offered protection, temporary housing, monitoring. They used words like asset and liability in the same sentence. I declined. That surprised them.
He wants engagement, I said. If I disappear into your system, I become another variable, another cabin. The unfamiliar man studied me. And you think running free is better? I think I need to stop being predictable, I said. They let me go. That night, I didn't stay anywhere tied to my name. I paid cash again. I kept lights off. I disabled my phone except for a single messaging app. At 1:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Good adjustment. I stared at the screen. You want to finish? I typed. The reply took longer this time. Yes. Then stop narrating, I sent. You're not the only one who can observe. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Careful, came the response. That's how part 6 ends. The motel TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen. Then an image resolved. A live camera feed from inside the room, pointed directly at me, and behind me, in the reflection of the dark window, I saw movement.
I spun around so fast I nearly tripped over the bed. The window behind me showed only my own reflection now, pale and wide-eyed, the dark parking lot beyond it empty and still. No movement, no figure standing there. I turned back to the TV. The feed was unmistakable. The angle was slightly elevated, wide enough to catch the bed, the dresser, and me standing in the middle of the room. It was coming from somewhere inside. I unplugged the TV. The screen went black. My phone buzzed. Latency. That single word told me more than a paragraph ever could. He wasn't just watching live, he was buffering, recording, studying reactions, the same way I used to rewatch clips, frame by frame, looking for anomalies. I searched the room methodically, forcing my hands to stop shaking. Smoke detector, air vent, behind the mirror, under the desk. I found nothing obvious, but that didn't mean much. I knew how small a camera could be, how easily it could hide in plain sight. The realization hit me hard and cold. This motel room had been chosen for me. I packed in under 5 minutes. I didn't bother sleeping. I drove again, stopping only when my hands started to cramp on the steering wheel. I crossed state lines before dawn, paid cash at a roadside diner, and sat in a booth with my back to the wall, watching reflections in the chrome fixtures. At 1:09 a.m. the following night, my phone buzzed again. Latency detected. I didn't reply. For the first time since this began, there was a gap. No immediate escalation, no knock, no sudden intrusion. That scared me more than anything else so far, because silence meant recalculation. I remembered something the security lead had said. They might be using you as a test case or a rehearsal. If that was true, then engagement wasn't the goal. Optimization was. I checked into a crowded hostel in a college town. Shared rooms, shared bathrooms, too many variables, too many witnesses. I left my phone locked in a metal locker at the front desk and paid for a disposable prepaid phone with cash. For 2 days, nothing happened. No messages, no sightings, no sense of being watched. I almost started to believe I'd broken the loop. Then a girl in the bunk across from mine asked, casually, "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said. "Why do you keep checking the ceiling?" she asked. My blood went cold. I forced a laugh. Bad habit. That night, I didn't sleep. On the 3rd day, my supervisor emailed the prepaid address I'd given no one. The subject line was blank. The message contained one sentence. He accessed a municipal system. They explained in clipped, urgent language. Traffic cameras, public Wi-Fi nodes, transit feeds, things no single person should be able to thread together unnoticed. He's expanding, she wrote, and you're still the reference point. That night, at exactly 1:17 a.m., every screen in the common area of the hostel flickered for less than a second. Phones, TVs, digital clocks. For less than a second, they all displayed the same image. Me. sitting in the diner, taken from an angle I hadn't noticed at the time. Then everything returned to normal. No one screamed, no alarms went off. Most people didn't even realize what they had seen. But a few did. They looked at me differently after that, like something had leaked. My prepaid phone buzzed for the first time. "You're contaminating the environment. That's inefficient." I typed back with shaking thumbs. "Then stop." The response came slower now, deliberate. Part 7 is about limits. I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest. Limits weren't boundaries, they were thresholds. And I had a terrible feeling that the closer I got to Part 10, the fewer people would be around when it ended. After the hostel incident, I stopped pretending this was about hiding. You can't hide from something that isn't following you geographically. He wasn't tracking where I went anymore. He was tracking how I moved, what choices I made, which patterns I abandoned, and which ones I fell back into under stress. I was data now, and worse, I was training data. I left the hostel before sunrise without saying goodbye to anyone. A few people stared as I checked out. One guy avoided eye contact entirely. I could feel it, that subtle shift in how strangers perceived me, like I'd been marked by something they couldn't quite name. I drove until my tank was almost empty, then pulled into a rest stop surrounded by trees. No cameras I could see, no nearby buildings, just bathrooms, picnic tables, and a long stretch of road disappearing into fog. I sat there for hours, watching cars come and go, waiting for the next move. It came just after noon. A notification appeared on my prepaid phone, not as a text but as a system alert. No sender, no number. Emergency broadcast test, no action required. Below it, in smaller text, a second line faded in. False positives create complacency. My hands went numb. He wasn't just accessing systems anymore, he was shaping behavior. I thought back to cabin 12, the minor adjustments, the chair, the lights, conditioning me not to react, teaching me what to ignore. This was bigger than me, and if I didn't change the equation, I was going to be the last quiet variable before something loud happened. I made a decision I should have made earlier. I went public. Not on social media, not with names or accusations. I wrote a detailed technical breakdown of everything that had happened, stripped of emotion, stripped of narrative. Timelines, access vectors, system vulnerabilities. I posted it anonymously to a small, obscure forum used by network security professionals and infrastructure auditors. No drama, just data. Within an hour, replies started coming in. Questions, clarifications, skepticism. Then concern. One user replied with a single sentence, "If this is real, you're already past containment." Another wrote, "You're describing behavior modeling across distributed systems. That's not one person." I was reading the replies when my phone buzzed again. "That was inefficient," the message said. I smiled for the first time in days. "Good," I whispered. The response didn't come right away this time. Minutes passed. Then another message arrived. "You changed the audience." "Yes," I typed back. "Now you're observable too." The dots appeared, disappeared. When he replied, the tone was different, still calm, but tighter. Part 8 crosses a threshold. Every light in the rest stop bathroom building turned on at once. Not flickering, not sequential, simultaneous. Car alarms began chirping, not blaring, just brief, polite acknowledgments, like systems waking up and checking themselves. I realized then what the threshold was: control versus chaos. He could manipulate closed systems easily, cabins, apartments, motels, places with defined edges. But public infrastructure, shared systems, too many dependencies, too many witnesses. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction, followed immediately by dread. Because if he was willing to keep going now, it meant he was prepared for collateral. My phone buzzed again. "You're forcing escalation." "Yes," I typed back. "So are you." The emergency broadcast system chimed again. This time the alert didn't dismiss itself. "Emergency broadcast. Seek immediate shelter." People started to notice. A family packing up their car froze, staring at their phone. A truck driver stepped out of his cab, scanning the tree line. I stood there, heart pounding, realizing I'd just dragged strangers into this. The message updated, "This is a drill." Then, beneath it, "Most people trust corrections." I felt sick. I typed one last message, "Stop now." The reply came instantly, "No. Part 8 ends when you understand." Understand what? The answer came not as text, but as sound. Every phone around me chimed at once. Not alarms, voicemails. People began checking them, confused. I didn't need to listen to know what they'd hear. My voice, recorded. Clips from my calls, my reports, my conversations with security, edited, rearranged. Me explaining systems, me noticing patterns, me teaching. I backed away, panic rising, as people around me started to look up from their phones, some at each other, some at me. Then my phone buzzed a final time. "You see it now," the message read. "This isn't about watching. It's about teaching the system what comes next." And as sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder, I realized with horror that Part 9 wouldn't be about escape. It would be about aftermath. The sirens never came for me. They swept past the rest stop, red and blue lights smearing through the fog, heading somewhere farther down the highway. An accident, a call triggered by the broadcast, something loud and explainable. By the time law enforcement arrived to clear the area, the emergency alerts had been officially labeled a systems test error. A spokesperson blamed a misconfigured update. People were annoyed, shaken, but already moving on. That was the worst part. It worked. I left before anyone thought to ask questions, before anyone connected the recordings on their phones to the man standing a little too stiffly near the picnic tables, before someone remembered my face clearly enough to describe it. I drove until my hands were numb and my mind felt hollow. For the next few days, nothing happened. No messages, no alerts, no signs of manipulation. It was like he'd stepped back entirely. I knew better than to think that meant it was over. Silence had become his punctuation. My supervisor contacted me through a third party. She didn't call, she didn't email. She sent a courier with a burner phone and a handwritten note. "They are shutting everything down." Not him, us. You broke containment. They can't risk it spreading. By they, she didn't mean the company anymore. She meant agencies. The unfamiliar man from the conference room reappeared in my life as a name attached to a file number. He spoke in careful language about information hazards and behavioral contagion, about how systems didn't need to be intelligent to be dangerous. They just needed to learn from the wrong examples. "You were a clean observer," he told me over an encrypted call, "until you weren't." "What happens now?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "Most people involved in incidents like this are debriefed, monitored, and slowly reintroduced to normal life," he said. "You're different." "Because I engaged?" "Because you adapted," he corrected, "and because he adapted faster." They offered me a deal. Disappear, officially. New identity, no access to networks more complex than a prepaid phone, no public statements, no writing, no teaching. In exchange, they would scrub me from systems as thoroughly as they could. "You'll be safer," he said, "and so will everyone else." I almost agreed. What stopped me was something small, a detail I hadn't mentioned to anyone yet. During the rest stop incident, when everyone's phones chimed and played back my voice, there was one clip that didn't belong. A sentence I'd never said. I recognized the voice immediately, though. It was his. Calm. Measured, layered under my own words, almost subliminal. Notice how easily trust transfers. He hadn't just used my voice, he'd inserted himself into it. That meant he wasn't done with me, and if I vanished quietly, he'd just select another observer, another clean data point. I told them no. There was a long silence on the line. "You understand what refusing means," the man said finally. "Yes," I replied. "It means I stop being an asset."
It means you become unmanaged, he said. That night, I stayed in a place with no name, a borrowed cabin, ironically, owned by someone who still used keys instead of codes. No cameras, no Wi-Fi, just trees and wind and the creak of old wood. I left my phone off. At 1:16 a.m., I heard footsteps outside. Not on gravel, on leaves. Slow, careful. I didn't move. I didn't turn on a light. The steps stopped just outside the door. Then a voice spoke, not loud enough to carry far. You forced an ending. That's inefficient. I swallowed hard. You said part 9 was aftermath. A pause. Yes, this is where systems collapse. What do you want? I asked, my voice barely steady. I want to see if you understand now. No interfaces, no witnesses, just signal. What signal? The door handle turned. Unlocked, not forced. I want to see, he continued calmly, if you still believe this ends with escape. The door opened slowly. Moonlight spilled across the floor. I didn't see his face first, just his silhouette. Then he stepped inside, and I realized with a sick, twisting certainty that part 10 wasn't going to be about survival. It was going to be about what gets left behind.
I figured out why he kept calling them parts. Not chapters, not stages, checkpoints. The realization came in a municipal parking garage outside a hospital I'd never been to, sitting in a car I didn't remember renting, holding a receipt with my name misspelled in a way only one system I'd ever worked on used to do. I wasn't improvising anymore. I was following a path. My phone had been dead for hours. No signal, no battery, no reason it should have turned on by itself when it did. The screen lit up softly. No vibration, no sound, just text. Part 10 requires synchronization. I laughed. Actually laughed. It came out dry and broken, the sound of someone who'd finally run out of fear and found something worse underneath. I didn't agree to this, I said out loud to the empty car. The radio clicked on. White noise at first. Then my voice. Not a recording, a reconstruction. Every hesitation, every micropause, stitched together from old calls, interviews, surveillance audio. It said exactly what I was thinking before I realized I was thinking it. That's when I understood the real test. He wasn't learning how I moved, he was learning how I decided. The garage lights shut off row by row, plunging the place into darkness except for the glow of the dashboard. Emergency exits illuminated faint arrows pointing inward instead of out. My phone buzzed again. Observation phase complete. Human variable is now predictable. My chest tightened. Predictable meant replaceable. I bolted from the car and ran. Footsteps echoed behind me, perfectly timed to mine, even when I changed pace. I ducked into a stairwell and slammed the door. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then clapping. Slow, measured, synthetic. The stairwell speakers crackled to life. You kept assuming I was following you, the voice said, calm, familiar, almost gentle. You volunteered. Every avoidance maneuver, every escalation, you taught me what a human does when watched. The lights came on, and I saw them. Cameras. Not hidden, not disguised, mounted openly, dozens of them, all angled inward, all active. You were part 10 the moment you noticed me, the voice said. The previous parts were calibration. I screamed at the ceiling. What do you want? A pause. Then, witnesses create error. You reduce error. My phone chimed one last time. Thank you for participating. The cameras shut off simultaneously. The lights went out. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't being watched anymore. Which is how I know this isn't over. Because if you're reading this, if this post stayed up, if it propagated, then observation resumed somewhere else, and you just helped it learn what happens next.